Welcome back to UBG Bytes. This is the deep dive where we, really get into the sources and figure out the nitty-gritty detail.
Yeah, what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And today we are taking a serious look under the hood of macOS. We're going to talk about attacker techniques we're seeing right now, basically, and some vulnerabilities that popped up, in the last year or two that are just super relevant if you're doing offensive work on Macs.
That's right. We've pulled together quite a bit of intel here. We've got recent reports on a, let's say, newer variant of the Banshee Stealer.
Okay.
And some really good deep dives from researchers. Microsoft, watch this space, covering some pretty juicy macOS bugs from 2024, 2025. Plus some analysis on IPC issues from Objective-C, and just a general guide to macOS security concepts to tie it together.
So our goal for you today is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the key technical details from all this, help you understand how the macOS threat landscape is, shifting. And maybe more interestingly, get you thinking about how sophisticated attackers might actually chain some of these newer vulnerabilities together.
Yeah, that's the interesting part.
We're not saying, this specific stealer uses these specific bugs. That's not the point. But understanding the potential toolkit, the components, that's crucial if you're looking at attacker tradecraft.
Absolutely.
macOS isn't just for hipsters anymore, right? It's definitely a target for both red and blue teams now.
Huh. Indeed. So, okay, let's kick off with that evolving threat piece. There's a report from the UAE Cybersecurity Council dated October 1st, 2025, mind you.
Okay, quite recent then.
Yeah, and it flags a notable new variant of the Banshee Stealer. It seems to be targeting macOS users, pretty much globally.
Okay, Banshee, we've definitely heard that name before. And other macOS stealers too, right? Things like ROD, Poseidon, Pureland, So what makes this new Banshee variant special? What's the hook?
Well, the core function is, classic Stealer stuff. It's going after sensitive data. Browser creds, crypto wallets, macOS passwords.
The usual suspects for data exfil if you're pen testing.
Exactly. But what's really clever, and honestly a bit cheeky, is its main evasion technique.
Oh, do tell. What's the twist here?
So, the report highlights that this variant uses string encryption. Okay, get this. Derived directly from Apple's own XProtect antivirus engine.
Wait, hang on. They're taking code from Apple's built-in defenses and using it to hide from those same defenses. Wow. That's a bold move.
Right. Apparently, it let them fly under the radar for, over 2 months. They weaponized a piece of the defense itself.
It's like the alarm system giving the burglar the key code.
Pretty much. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but using XProtect's own methods against it. That just feels kind of rude.
Seriously. And it sounds like they're going global now, too, not just focusing on specific regions.
Yeah, the source mentions a November 2024 update where they specifically removed a check for the Russian language. That points pretty strongly towards, broadening the target base, going worldwide.
Okay. And how are they getting it onto machines? What's the initial access look like?
Pretty standard but effective stuff because it plays on user trust. Phishing websites, fake GitHub repos, making things look like legitimate downloads for popular apps.
Like Chrome or Telegram or something?
Yeah, actually, Chrome, Telegram, TradingView were mentioned. So for us, that's the initial vector you need to watch out for. Pete Krisk also summarized it as being stealthy, focused on privacy, financial, identity theft, and maybe even adding machines to a botnet later.
Okay, so a smarter, broader stealer.
Yep.
Now, how do the fundamental weaknesses in macOS itself, these recent vulns, how could they potentially help an attacker like this, or maybe an even more advanced one? Let's pivot to those juicy bugs you mentioned.
Right. And again, we're thinking of these as potential components, right?
Huh.
Tools an attacker might add to their arsenal.
Exactly. Potential tradecraft.
Okay, so let's start with CVE 2024-44243. This is a SIP bypass. System integrity protection.
SIP, yeah, the core lockdown thing on macOS protects system files, processes, social status, that command. Bypassing SIP is always a big deal. How did this one work?
So the method involved overriding binaries under library file systems. That's the user file systems directory, user FS.
Okay.
And the trick was triggering this override using either the disk utility app or just the discusal command line tool.
So messing with how custom file systems get mounted or handled, is that the idea?
Pretty much. The core flaw, Microsoft found this one, was inside the storage kit daemon.
Storage kit, okay.
Yeah, this daemon uses Apple's private storage kit framework, and here's a kicker. It would improperly invoke arbitrary processes, without validating what it was about to run, and crucially, without dropping its own privileges.
Whoa, hold on. A daemon that handles storage stuff can basically be told to run anything just by feeding it the right path, and it doesn't check who's asking or reduce its permissions first. That sounds really not good.
Not good at all. The impact is, well, significant. You get a full SIP bypass. And what's particularly interesting for persistence or stealth is you could override the Apple kernel extensions exclusion list.
Ah, okay. Messing with kexts via a SIP bypass gives you a really strong foothold.
Definitely. And the sources are clear.
Mm-hmm.
This is a bug in Storage Kit itself, right? A macOS flaw, not a problem with whatever specific file system binary got written.
Got it. SIP bypass via a trusted daemon messing up privilege handling. Powerful stuff. Okay, what's next? I saw something about TCC, transparency, consent, and control. That getting spoofed. CVE 2025-31250.
Yes, this one is almost insidious, nicknamed TCC Who. And yeah, TCC is that core privacy and permission system managed by the TCCD daemon, uses the tcc.db database.
Right, the pop-up you get asking, can this app access your camera, your mic, your contacts, that system.
Exactly that. The vulnerability was a logic bug found in the TCC access request indirect function within TCCD. So here's how it worked, roughly. An attacker sends a specific kind of message to PCCD using this function. They set one key target path to point to a legitimate trusted app. Think like system settings. That path is what TCCD uses to show the name in the pop-up prompt the user sees. System settings wants access.
Okay, makes sense so far.
But they set another key, target identifier, to the bundle ID of their malicious application.
Ah, okay, let me see if I follow. The user sees a prompt. It says, system settings wants to access your camera. They click allow because, it's system settings, seems legit.
Right.
But the permission, the entry in the TCC database, actually gets granted to the malware because its ID was slipped in.
That is precisely the attack. The database entry silently grants the permission to the malware, not the app whose name was shown. It completely spoofs the prompt. You trick the user into giving away mic access, camera access, whatever, to your malicious app.
That's nasty.
And there's another angle, too. You could potentially grant permissions to another, maybe less suspicious, app already on the system, which could enable more complex attacks. Asking for camera permissions is one thing, but getting system settings to ask for it for you, that's just using manners. The malicious kind.
Malicious manners. I like that. And the sources dug into the tech behind this too, right? Mentioning things like Apple events and mock messages.
They did. It dives into the layers of macOS IPC, the inter-process communication stuff. Apple events are, well, they're pretty old school. Honestly, probably older than many of our listeners.
Might have been written in Pascal originally.
Wouldn't surprise me. But they sit on top of more fundamental things like mock messages. Those are the really low-level message units that processes use to talk to system daemons like TCCD.
MIG versus XPC and all that.
Yeah, MIG, the mock interface generator, is often used for these older interfaces, though newer stuff often uses XPC. But understanding these low-level concepts, maybe even using a tool like CAS, which the source mentioned, to poke at mock messages, that's how you find and understand bugs like this TCC spoof.
It's kind of wild that vulnerabilities based on tech from, the 80s are still biting us today.
Well, it speaks to the complexity, the layers built up over time in operating systems. This specific TCC bug, reported May 2024, patched a year later in Sequoia 15.5, so May 2025.
Okay, so patched in the latest OS.
Right. But importantly, the sources noted that as of that May 14, 2025 update, Ventura 13.7.6 and Sonoma 14.7.6 were not patched.
So older but still widely used OS versions were left vulnerable for a while. Good to know for targeting.
Exactly. Makes them prime targets if unpatched.
Okay, so we have a SIP bypass and a TCC spoof. What was a third vulnerability you wanted to flag?
This one, Objective-C wrote about it. It's almost comically simple, but the impact could be huge. It's an IPC vulnerability in NetOff agent.
NetOff agent, right. That's the daemon that handles connecting to file servers like FTP, Samba, WebDAV, and crucially, it handles the credentials for those connections.
That's the one. Before it was patched, the NetOff agent's MIG server, the interface, was com.apple.netoff.user.gia. It had a really basic flaw. It would just leak any file server credentials it could get from the user's keychain to any process that sent it a mock message asking for them.
Wait, any process? It didn't check who was asking? No sender validation?
None. Zero. The source was blunt. None of the routines ever verified message senders before this patch.
A credential manager's handing out passwords over IPC, if you ask nicely. That's That's like a bank vault just giving cash to anyone who knocks. Laughably simple sounds about right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's pretty shocking for a credential handling component.
Wow. Okay, so what's the potential damage from something like that? What kind of creds are we talking about?
Well, immediate leakage of any stored file server credentials. Think corporate environments using SSO or shared drives. That's huge. And depending on the keychain access control lists, maybe even iCloud API tokens or other sensitive stuff stored there could be exposed. The source points out, how common it is for users just following Apple's guides to use Finder's Connect to Server and save their passwords.
Which uses NetAuth agent under the hood.
Precisely.
Yes.
So a super simple bug could expose a ton of really valuable intel just sitting there.
Okay. Wow. So let's piece this together from an attacker's view. We have a stealer, maybe like Banshee, getting smarter, spreading via convincing phishing. We have a SIP bypass using a dodgy daemon. We have TCC prompts that can be totally faked. And we have this credential fairy daemon just handing out secrets over IPC. For a pen tester listening, how might an attacker, maybe a really advanced Banshee spinoff, chain these things?
Okay, let's think hypothetically, right? Based only on what these sources describe. Not saying this is happening, but how it could. So attacker gets initial access, maybe one of those fake software downloads like the Banshee methods.
Okay, malware is running. Step one.
Well, if the target macOS version is vulnerable to that NetAuth agent bug, that seems like an immediate win.
Yep.
The malware could just ping NetAuth agent over mock.
Yep.
If there are saved file server creds, maybe vulnerable iCloud tokens, boom. Exfiltrate them instantly. No user interaction needed, no admin rights needed because the daemon wasn't checking who asked.
Grab the easy, high-value stuff first.
Yes, get that low-hanging fruit. Then, okay, what next? If they're on, say, an unpatched Ventura or Sonoma vulnerable to the TCC spoofing, CVE 2025-31250.
Right, the malicious manners bug.
Yeah. The malware could try to trick the user, spoof a prompt from system settings or some other trusted app, get the user to grant it camera access for spying, or maybe mic access, or maybe permission for another payload it dropped, helping with persistence or modularity.
So grab cred silently, then trick the user into granting more interactive sensitive permissions using a fake pop-up.
Okay. And then for really solid persistence, or maybe to disable security tools, if the SIP bypass, CVE 2024-44243, is available on that OS version. The malware could leverage that storage kit vulnerability, maybe via disk-util. That could let it modify or replace system binaries under library file systems. That could lead to persistence that's really hard to dig out, or maybe even let it bypass things like kernel extension block lists.
That's a pretty potent chain. Initial foothold, immediate credential theft, stealthy permission grabbing via spoofing, and then cementing persistence and control by disabling SIP. It really shows why just looking at the malware file itself isn't enough, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand the OS vulnerabilities it might be exploiting underneath.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Understanding these lower level things, how IPC actually works, how TCC grants permissions, the different ways SIP can be weakened or bypassed, it gives you a much deeper insight into the potential attack paths.
Yeah.
These specific bugs, okay, they get patched eventually newer OS versions, but the types of flaws, lack of sender validation in IPC, logic bugs in complex security frameworks like TCC, ways to subvert core protections like SIP. Those patterns, they keep coming back.
And thinking defensively, or maybe if you're doing incident response, the macOS security guide source kind of reinforces this. You need threat modeling, know what attackers are capable of. Patching obviously is key for these specific bugs. User education against those fake downloads helps too.
Right, the basics.
But for detection, knowing to look deeper, right, checking for weird network traffic, maybe with T-Shark, watching running processes carefully with PES or Activity Monitor, looking at file metadata Zatry, MDLs for clues left by installers, even understanding how sudoers or end keep home might be abused. That's all relevant when you're dealing with potential pervesc or persistence linked to these kinds of vulns.
Yeah, it's about going beyond just signatures and understanding the behaviors on the system that look suspicious.
Okay, this has been quite the deep dive. We've seen Banshee variants are getting sneakier, even borrowing from Apple's own defenses, which is wild. And we've explored how these recent macOS vulns hitting core systems, SIP, TCC, IPC, could be combined into some really nasty attack chains. So for you, the penetration tester listening, the main takeaway seems clear. You really need to understand the OS itself, the underlying machinery that attackers are targeting, not just the app layer stuff.